Our fine arts were developed. Their types and uses were established, in times very different from the present, by men whose power of action upon things was insignificant in comparison with ours. But the amazing growth of our techniques, the adaptability and precision they have attained, the ideas and habits they are creating, make it a certainty that profound changes are impending in the ancient craft of the beautiful. This is a snippet of a quote from Paul Valéry's Pieds sous l'art. It's cited in the preface of Walter Benjamin's The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, an essay published in 1935. As the title of the piece suggests, it brings to light how art has evolved with the added influence of technology, focusing on comparisons between physical artwork and videos or photos produced by a camera. But above all, Benjamin seems to be concerned with the deterioration of authenticity, the decline of art as an experience. Now, I know this all sounds a bit pretentious, because it kind of is, but I think it also makes us consider how art has always been and will continue to be vulnerable to exploitation and commodification, and furthermore, how humans have been exploited by art. When I'm at the Art Institute of Chicago looking at Edward Hopper's Nighthawks or Van Gogh's self-portrait, I'm experiencing what Benjamin calls aura. We define the aura of the latter as the unique phenomenon of a distance, however close it may be. If, while resting on a summer afternoon, you follow with your eyes a mountain range on the horizon, or a branch which casts its shadow over you, you experience the aura of those mountains, of that branch. There's a time and place about these paintings. Standing before them, I can discern the brushstrokes. I can feel this impending sense of a material thing which has been touched by the artist. And thus, I develop a connection with the art, not just through the messages in the image, but its actual creation by human hands. Now, if I take a picture of this piece and then post it to my social media, what happens to this aura? What happens to that feeling? The easiest answer is to say that the absence of traditional ritual, that being the action of going to a place to look at a thing, destroys the material aura, which can only manifest in a specific location. Perhaps scrolling on social media introduces a new kind of aura, which unconsciously manifests in the physical action of a finger touching a screen. But the aura, as Benjamin defines it, that which is rooted in a piece of art as limited and singular, is eradicated. Benjamin surmises, every day the urge grows stronger to get hold of an object at very close range by way of its likeness, its reproduction. Be that as it may, a technological reproduction of a painting is still contained behind a wall of pixels, past the barrier of a smooth screen which could never truly represent the depths of a physical piece of art. According to some people, this is the way it should stay. The special experience of art should always be limited to the people who can afford to make the trip to the museum. With respect to the aura inevitably being tied down to materiality, I agree. But there's a clear ignorance in this, albeit incredibly extreme restriction of art. Now, I feel that Benjamin, although he is establishing that this aura exists, is not necessarily arguing that limitation is a good thing either. He later adds, above all, it enables the original to meet the beholder halfway, be it in the form of a photograph or a phonograph record. The cathedral leaves its locale to be received in the studio of a lover of art. The choral production, performed in an auditorium or in the open air, resounds in the drawing room. One of the best things about technology is the accessibility it allows to masses of people. It permits aspirations towards the purest idea of the aura, while simultaneously granting individuals the power to create their own methods of entry and discovery. However, I believe Benjamin might be hinting at problems which arise when the ritual is completely forgotten or replaced by the reproduction. Although I think this issue manifests itself most prevalently in film, it also applies to other digital spaces. Movies being made for streaming services instead of traditional movie theaters is certainly not a new concept. But things that used to have some kind of unique ritualistic value, think websites, webcomics, and even YouTube thumbnails and video topics, to name a few, have all started to blend into one big slop pile of sameness, canceling each other out, meaning nothing. The cohesive style is so standardized that we don't have to consciously pay attention anymore. We don't have to think. Now, I'm not bringing this up to undermine individual creators, The bigger issue here is related to what artists are having to abide by in order to be successful. The algorithm, a mysterious set of data which says, this makes money and this doesn't. The choices are starting to be made for us. Accessibility becomes an excuse for laziness. Sure, this film kind of sucks, but you don't need to go to a movie theater to watch it. And just like that, uniqueness is gone. Everything feels the same. As humans, we're no doubt becoming computers, throwing up commodified content until it's too late to realize that we've become the commodities ourselves. But this is nothing new. The painting invites the spectator to contemplation. Before it, the spectator can abandon himself to his associations. Before the movie frame, he cannot do so. No sooner has his eye grasped the scene than it is already changed. It cannot be arrested. Because I'm speaking primarily about entertainment, I think it's important to turn to The Culture Industry, Enlightenment as Mass Deception, a chapter from Horkheimer and Adorno's 1944 book, Dialectic of Enlightenment. While Benjamin focuses on the mechanical reproduction of existing art, Horkheimer and Adorno examine the standardization and mass production of new pieces of art via technology, manipulated by oppressive economic and governmental tactics. The standardized forms, it is claimed, were originally derived from the needs of the consumers. That is why they are accepted with so little resistance. In reality, a cycle of manipulation and retroactive need is unifying the system ever more tightly. What is not mentioned is that the basis on which technology is gaining power over society is the power of those whose economic position in society is strongest. By the end of World War II, these sentiments could not have been reflected better than in the normalcy of classic Hollywood cinematic techniques. From around the 1930s to the 1960s, Hollywood films seemed to follow similar narrative structures and editing techniques, with an added emphasis on clarity and continuity. For what it's worth, the ways in which directors are able to carefully guide viewers through their story is incredibly compelling, speaking to the importance of individualistic artistic vision. But once again, issues start to arise when the artist is nudged out of the picture, when economic interests operate the camera. What once was original, fixed to an artist and their vision, is accessed, exploited, and subsequently destroyed, replaced with an unconscious process of absorption as opposed to captivation. Horkheimer and Adorno continue. Today need not be traced back to psychological mechanisms. The products themselves, especially the most characteristic, the sound film, cripple those faculties through their objective makeup. They are so constructed that their adequate comprehension requires a quick, observant, knowledgeable cast of mind, but positively debars the spectator from thinking, if he is not to miss the fleeting facts. This kind of alertness is so ingrained that it does not even need to be activated in particular cases, while still repressing the powers of imagination. Alright, at this point I know everything is starting to sound a bit repetitive. Blah blah, people don't think anymore, blah blah, commodification of art, false consciousness, blah blah, capitalism bad. We're seeing so much of this, feeling it and talking about it, but nothing is happening, nothing is changing. There's this notion of revolution that has also been commodified as an aesthetic which is ultimately empty and signifies nothing. This might sound obvious, but for things to change, there needs to be an antithesis to the thesis. For example, in the 1960s, the classic Hollywood style was rejected in favor of experimental films, which took editing, framing, lighting, all the aspects of mise-en-scène they were given, and messed around a little bit. These films allowed the viewer some room to think, to stew in the silences, to conspire with devious characters and storylines which reflected a culture of unrest. Unfortunately, with the way historical cycles work, we tend to forget the past a lot. As of now, it feels like a majority of the films being released have once again resorted to holding the viewer's hand. Of course, I'm in no way saying that everything being produced is all easily digestible pandering. There are tons of fantastic films coming out each year that don't do these things. But the mass culture, as Horkheimer and Adorno put it, seems to be kind of overshadowing everything a little bit. We're starting to expect remakes and bad CGI, which is presumably made up for with cameos and subsequent nostalgia bait. Hey, you over there. Yeah, I know this movie is abysmal to look at and the plot makes no sense, but Captain America, who died, is also here. He died, but he's here now, which makes sense. It's a weird time travel thing. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that things will eventually change. They always do. But in respect to Walter Benjamin's idea of the aura, I implore you to be wary of the illusion of choice. Yes, I have the option to ask artificial intelligence to generate a piece of art for me, but that ultimately starts to rob me of a yearning for a physical thing, whether I realize it or not. When reproductions of art become replacements of art, there will no longer be a choice. So I suppose this video is a long-winded way of saying, consider the deterioration of the aura, and seek out that aura in any way that you are able. You can and you should think and theorize, but more importantly, go out and create things that introduce meaning to a culture of art that currently feels like nothing. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for sticking around and hearing what I have to say. Honestly, this is a pretty baseline argument about some pieces of theory that have so many ideas to explore, but I found even the surface level discussion to be quite compelling in light of the current state of the world. So I hope this short ramble gave you some hope and maybe a little bit of inspiration as well.